What is going on, everybody? I hope all of you had an amazing Thanksgiving. As always, it's Ryan Heath with Fantasy Points here, and welcome back again to Data Points. This is the show where I walk you through exactly how to win at DFS, at your prop betting, and how to dominate your seasonal fantasy football leagues. And I'm going to do all that using, as always, the Fantasy Points data suite. So let's get right into it for week 14. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
So we're starting off here in advanced receiving defense. I've gone ahead and already filtered for only passes that travel 20 or more yards down the field. If we go ahead here and just sort by receiving yards per game, you can see, okay, the Cleveland Browns have allowed the second most receiving yards per game on deep throws. So given that they are playing the Steelers this weekend, we are here in normal advanced receiving. So just seeing by players, I've done the same thing, filtered by targets going 20 or more yards downfield. And you can see here, George Pickens actually leads the league in receptions on those deep throws. Also leads the league in yards on those deep balls. So this is a perfect kind of stylistic matchup for George Pickens. He can be very good on the deep ball this week, right? Let's dive into the schematic matchup as well. So the Browns play a lot of single high. You can see we're here in coverage matrix defense. 63.5% of the time, the Browns are playing single high looks. How does Pickens fare against those? Back in advanced receiving, just filtered here for single high. Sort by yards per out run. George Pickens, top 3 in yards per out run this season against single high, only behind A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson. So yeah, it's a very good schematic matchup for Pickens as well. Now you might say, Ryan, I have a memory, right? I remember that the Steelers played the Browns literally 2 weeks ago, and George Pickens did not have that big of a game. So I understand that concern, right? So here in advanced receiving, I've gone ahead and just gone to week 12 so we can see when Pickens last played the Browns a couple weeks ago. And yeah, only 4 receptions, 48 yards on 7 targets, nothing special. I will say he did rank second in the league in air yards that week. And 142 air yards. That's a lot of opportunities to put up fantasy points, right? And we can see, well, why didn't he convert this into production? We can go ahead here and toggle to no for the catchable filter. And this is going to show us all the stats on only uncatchable targets for this player, or for all these players when it loads up. But you can see here, 99 of Pickens' air yards that game were completely uncatchable. So 99 out of 142 of his air yards, he didn't even have a chance to catch. It's just bad luck with Russell Wilson not throwing him catchable balls that week. He's done fairly well with Pickens since he's taken over in terms of giving him catchable air yards. So I really do think that week 12 was a bit of a fluke, and we kind of get a mulligan here in what is still a great schematic matchup for George Pickens. So I'm pretty excited to play him in DFS, especially if people are going to be off of him because of what happened last time, right? All right, let's move on to data point number 2. We are here in the schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed tool. This will be within the data suite proper eventually, but for now it lives on the site. This is a free tool, by the way. You don't even need to have a data suite subscription to have access to this for the rest of the season. Really cool tool. But what we care about here is that sorting here by outside wide receivers, fantasy points allowed to the outside, the Jaguars have allowed the most to opposing outside wide receivers. And you're going to see that that is very good for Calvin Ridley. So back here in the data suite, same thing as when we were looking at the Browns earlier. Just wanted to highlight here, the Jaguars have allowed the most receiving yards per game on these deep targets going 20 or more yards downfield. So that is going to play into Calvin Ridley's strengths as well. Same thing here in advanced receiving, filtered for targets 20 or more yards downfield. And you can see Ridley ranks top 5 in expected fantasy points per game on those deep throws. Expected fantasy points, basically just an all-encompassing volume stat that describes on average how many fantasy points a player should score given all normal efficiency on that volume that they saw. So Ridley getting a lot of deep opportunities, should have a lot of deep opportunities against the Jaguars this week. Let's again look at the schematic matchup back here in the coverage matrix defense. The Jaguars play a lot of man coverage. They're very man heavy this season, 41% of the time behind only the Detroit Lions. How does Ridley fare against man? Pretty well. So back here in advanced receiving, go ahead and just filter for man coverage here. You can, as I've already done. But Ridley ranks 3rd in target share against man coverage. Only Malik Neighbors and George Pickens have a higher target share than Ridley against man this season. So yeah, I mean, he just commands all of this volume against man coverage. He's been awesome against it. The Jaguars are extremely vulnerable outside and deep. So yeah, that's Calvin Ridley as your kind of high volatility, as always, DFS play. But I really like him this week. It's been a couple weeks since he's hit really big. So I think he is a good guy to just get into your lineup, add some volatility, add some upside. All right, and then finally, for data point number 3, we're back here in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed. Notice here that we're instead of in all, so this tab is the full season, we can actually look at last 5 to see how defenses have performed more recently, just over the past 5 weeks. And what I want to point out here is, so just sorting by points allowed to running backs, the Chicago Bears are top 5 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs over the past 5 weeks. They've been giving up a lot to opposing running backs. That is good for Isaac Guerendo. And here we're in our O-line, D-line matchups tool. And it's not just the fantasy points matchup that's great for Guerendo. It's also, the line matchups. So San Francisco, sorted by rush grade, has our 3rd best rush grade this week. That's because the 49ers are generating a decent amount of adjusted yards before contact per attempt. They're top 7 in it. And the Bears, you can see over here in the defense section, are allowing 2.67 adjusted yards before contact per attempt. That is the 2nd most. Something you might hear a lot this week is, well, what about Trent Williams? How is this offense going to look without Trent Williams? That's going to be really bad. So we can actually see how they've looked without him over the past 2 weeks. So remember, 2.1 adjusted yards before contact over the full season. If we just go here and select the past 2 weeks, so week 12 and week 13, this is going to load and repopulate with the stats for only these past 2 weeks. And you can see the 49ers, 2.23 adjusted yards before contact per attempt over the past 2 weeks without Trent Williams. They've still been totally fine in the run game without him. I'm a little bit more worried about their passing offense, but I think Guerendo in the run game can do okay even without Williams in this matchup, especially. And then finally, I just want to highlight schematically. So we're here in advanced rushing offense. Normally I'd go into running backs, but obviously Guerendo has only had a handful of rush attempts. So we can just stick at the team level here with the Shanahan scheme. As we know, they like to run a lot of these zone running concepts, right? So 4th highest attempt rate on these zone concepts for the 49ers offense this season. If we go into advanced rushing defense, sort by yards per carry on those zone concepts, you can see the Bears, have allowed the 4th most yards per carry against these zone concepts, 4.8. So just kind of everywhere you look, it is a good matchup for Isaac Guerendo. He's really the cheapest super viable running back on the DraftKings slate this week. It's going to be pretty popular, I think, to pay up to the Alvin Kamaras, to the Saquon Barkleys. But if you're trying to fit in an expensive stack somewhere else, I do think paying down to Guerendo can make some sense in the correct lineup. So that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching as always. And now that you've seen how powerful the Fantasy Points data suite can be, make sure you are going to data.fantasypoints.com to sign up for access to it for yourself. As always, we have the standalone data suite subscription, or we have the all-in package, which gets you access as well to my DFS picks and my prop bets informed by stats like the ones in this video. Good luck in week 14, guys.